Welcome back to another episode of In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, CEO of academia.edu, and today we're diving into a truly fascinating paper by Dani Irwanto. Yeah, the same Dan Irwanto who's done extensive work on Southeast Asian prehistory and controversial theories like Atlantis in the Java Sea. Now, as always, I want to make it super clear. My role here is to walk you through the insights of Irwanto's work and not to endorse or advocate for any particular theory or conclusion. This is about understanding academic research as a living, breathing conversation, not absolute truth, right? So, the paper's called Decoding Signs of the Past, a semiotic and linguistic, but at its core, the big question Irwanto takes on is, how can we reconstruct the ancient past when all we have are, scattered myths, legends, old inscriptions, and a bunch of broken pottery? Is it even possible to make sense of those fragments, or are we just like spinning stories in the sand? That question really matters. For you, for me, for anyone who's ever wondered if there's a real story behind legends like Atlantis, the Land of Punt, Taprobana, or the mysterious Aurea Chersonesus. If myths do preserve hidden memories, could decoding them tell us something meaningful about human history? Or, are we just projecting patterns where none exist? That's, sort of the eternal mystery for historians and archaeologists. So what does Irwanto actually propose? The key idea here is using semiotics, the science of signs and meaning, and linguistics to systematically decode those myths, texts, and even symbols on pottery. Instead of starting with the archaeological dig and dismissing non-physical sources as unreliable, Irwanto argues we should treat myths and legends as structured systems of signs that can, if approached carefully, preserve fragments of historical memory, and if you're like me and sometimes forget what semiotics even is, it's basically the study of how things mean what they mean. Irwanto borrows from thinkers like Saussure, Peirce, Jacobson, Barthes, all those classic semiotics folks, to see myths as layered texts. Each one has a literal meaning, a cultural meaning, and at a deeper level, a mythic or ideological meaning. If you break those down systematically, you might pull out enduring archetypes that point to real events or places. Now, how does he actually go about this? That's the interesting methodological bit. Irwanto describes three big models for reconstructing the past from fragments. There's the potsherds model, where each piece of evidence, like a myth or artifact, is treated as just one isolated clue, like shards scattered across the sand. Then there's the anastylosis model, which is kind of like rebuilding a ruin from its original blocks, using as much authentic material as possible to anchor the reconstruction. And then you have the puzzle model. This one's almost like, assembling a modern jigsaw, but half the pieces are from different puzzles. You try to create something cohesive out of odds and ends. And here's a really key part. Irwanto emphasizes the importance of consilience. That's a fancy word meaning when evidence from completely different sources, like myths, maps, genetic studies, and archaeology, all point in the same direction. He basically says, look, if all these separate lines of evidence converge, then maybe, just maybe, our reconstruction is more robust than if we just followed one thread. For listeners, what does all this mean? Well, it's a call to open your mind to multiple sources of evidence, even the slippery or symbolic ones, but it's also a strong caution. None of this is settled knowledge. Irwanto's method is a way to test hypotheses, not to declare final answers. Let's take a quick look at how he applies this. For example, in his decoding of the Atlantis story from Plato, Irwanto uses semiotic models to read beyond the literal, like those famous concentric circles of land and water, as both physical geography and symbols, potentially pointing to real places in Southeast Asia. Or, with the Land of Punt, he reassembles Egyptian inscriptions and symbolic clues and, surprisingly, suggests Sumatra, not somewhere in Africa, matches best. There's also Taprobana, which he argues is actually Borneo, not Sri Lanka, if you follow the symbolic breadcrumbs. Are these conclusions controversial? Oh, absolutely. But they illustrate how different an analysis can look when you start from myth as a structured code instead of just a story. I should probably pause here and admit, sometimes when I hear about Atlantis or lost civilizations, my mind just veers off to pop culture. Like, are we wandering into Indiana Jones territory or maybe a Netflix adventure series? But anyway, not really the point of Irwanto's paper, though it points to just how much these ancient mysteries captivate our imaginations, right? So to sum up, Danny Irwanto's paper isn't saying these legendary places are, without doubt, Southeast Asian lands, but rather, if you use semiotics and linguistics and combine that with archaeology and genetics and climatology, you might see intriguing new possibilities. And hey, none of this is absolute truth. It's part of a bigger, ongoing conversation about how to mine meaning from the past with every tool we can muster, including stories, symbols, and yes, broken pots. That's it for today on In Depth with Academia. I hope this episode gives you some fresh ways to think about how myths and history interact and how academic research is an adventure, sometimes mysterious, sometimes controversial, but always evolving. Remember, we're here to explore together, skeptically and curiously, and there are always more questions just around the corner. Until next time, keep digging for knowledge, not just answers.